Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Career Design Talk Show. My name is Chanmugham. I'm an executive career and leadership coach, founder of MGC Coaching, where I work with ambitious professionals, helping them create more fulfilling careers. Today on the show, I'm excited to speak with Arpad Zakal, who's joining me. He's an executive search and leadership assessment professional and former aviation lawyer based in England, based in London. And today on the show, here's what we're going to talk about. Arpad's here to discuss how can you get on the radar of executive recruiters. More specifically, we're going to talk about the difference between retained search and contingency search. We're going to talk about how executives can stand out in the job market. And finally, we're going to talk about what's the best way to establish a meaningful relationship with an executive recruiter. And so without further ado, Arpad, welcome to the show. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Mo, thank you for the opportunity to be here and be interviewed by you. I have an unconventional background because not all my career has been in executive search. I started my career in law, specifically aviation law, which is the liability, the insurance aspects of aviation catastrophes is what I was handling prior to my career in search. So very serious subject. Essentially, you're dealing with people who lost their loved ones or have themselves been hurt in a catastrophe, basically involving an aircraft. So.
Right. And were you practicing in London?
Yeah, I was studying here in the UK, then I did a master's in the Netherlands, and then I practiced in London. Yeah.
Great. And so that's interesting. I think a lot of people might be interested in hearing about how you made that transition out of law into executive search.
My last role in law was a contract, Mo, and the contract came to an end. I didn't really have any opportunity to stay with the firm, and the HR department put me in touch with one of their suppliers, which was a contingent legal specialist recruitment company, and with a view of me getting another long-term legal role. That never happened. They didn't have anything in the area, and they asked me if I would like to join in the recruitment capacity. And given that I didn't have anything else, I joined. That's where so.
And I'm curious, were you excited about that opportunity, or you just kind of took it just to take it? Was there any interest at all in doing this kind of work?
Initially, I had zero interest. I mean, I didn't even know what a recruitment was. But I made 3 placements in my first 8 months in the role, and I quite enjoyed the chase. I quite enjoyed the client-facing aspect of the role as well, and that's why I decided to stick to it. At that time, I didn't know anything about search itself. No, it was. It's not an industry that advertises itself widely to the external market. And I set up informational interviews with people who were working at big established search firms like Korn Ferry and Spencer Stewart and Russell Reynolds. Some of them were kind enough to meet me, and that's how I informed myself about the industry itself.
Great. And so how long have you been in the search industry?
It's coming up to 7 years now.
Okay. And have you been with the same firm for the last 7 years?
No, I started with a contingent firm in the legal recruitment space.
Okay.
Maybe it would be helpful for the listeners to just explain what the difference is between the contingency and search. So, contingency recruitment firms are hired by organizations, and they tend to work at junior to mid-level roles. They're also not exclusively retained, but they work with many of these firms. And basically, contingency means that whether or not you are paid for the assignment is contingent on the success of the placement. So you only get paid if your hire is successful. Basically, if the individual really joins. Whereas search firms, they are retained. So basically an organization only works with one particular search firm. They tend to be very senior, sort of C-level and board level assignments. Also, search consultants typically focus on one sector, one function as well. Some of them only deal with CFOs, CTOs, chief procurement officers or chief general counsels, things like that. So
Right.
they have a sector and
Yep.
functional focus as well.
Got it.
And they typically vet candidates, they assess them, they really do the homework. So you as a client, you don't really have to do anything. You just need to see if there's chemistry, if you get on well with them, and then you just have to make a decision who out of the 3 or 4 maximum candidates that were presented to you, you want to hire.
Sure. Okay. Got it. Got it. So that's really interesting. So from the standpoint of an executive looking for a job, is there a difference between working with a contingency recruiter versus a retained? Is it harder to work with a retained recruiter? From the standpoint of the job seeker, can you explain a little bit about the difference there?
It's a little bit trickier to establish a meaningful and proper relationship with a search consultant, no, because those in the search industry, they're very client driven. So it's basically, as a search consultant, you have a mandate, and your job is to fill that particular mandate with the people who are best positioned to do that job.
Right.
And search consultants are sometimes not that open to talk to people who are out in the market actively and who are actively looking for jobs, simply because a client wants the best of the best, and the best of the best are likely to be employed at the moment.
Sure, yeah.
And that's why, as a job seeker, it's not always easy to really just get an interview with these search guys. So that's why maybe it's, if you're actively looking, don't overlook the contingent players, because it might be easier for you to
I see.
to talk to them and get an interview with them, and really just get to know a few recruitment consultants.
Right. And from your perspective, what made you go from contingency to the retained search type of agency?
I think the main reason is because I wanted to really focus on the industrial sectors, like things like aerospace, defense, manufacturing, infrastructure like ports, airports, rail. Those are given my background, that's my real interest, not legal search. And also the opportunity to work at really high strategic board level, chair level roles. I think that's only possible within a big search firm. And also I was attracted to the structured nature of search, basically, which is missing from contingency.
Sure.
It's not the same.
That's fascinating. I think most of us don't have a good inside look into the life of a retained search executive like yourself. Could you share a little bit about, you mentioned, the high level strategy that goes into finding someone at a board level or a C-level job. Could you share a little bit about what that strategy looks like? How do you find these people? Are you working with other team members?
So what normally happens is that we get approached by the client with a particular business issue or business problem. So at that level, they don't just want to hire they don't just need a bum on a seat. It's a specific business challenge that they are trying to solve with a CFO, a chief financial officer, or a chief technology officer. So it's a strategic aim that they are trying to achieve there. And what we help them with is having a very close look at the market, who's available, who are the players, what are the sectors, the companies that we should look at. And then we go in a very targeted manner after those individuals. That it's normally not more than 50, 60 people globally who are realistically capable of doing the job. Basically. So these are global searches. Even if it's a company in the US or in Europe, we typically have a look at the global arena and identify individuals who are really likely to engage with us or with our client. Right.
And so that's interesting. So you start with that a global research. It's a global search, and when you zero in on the small pool of candidates that sort of meet the criteria, What then happens? Is it simply a phone call, an email? Is it through your own network that you meet with these people?
It normally starts with an introductory phone call. If the individual is in the same city where you are, obviously here in London, we get to, or up until recently, we got to meet with most of the individuals that we worked with.
Right.
And then after the introduction, we typically schedule in a more in-depth sort of assessment. We use tools like the Hogan assessment, leadership assessment suite that helps you make a better, more informed decision as to who you want to hire into your team. Basically,
Right.
Those are typically culture assessments.
I see. So it sounds like there's a lot of vetting done up front before you introduce them to the client. How is it from the individual's perspective? Are they generally happy to hear from you? Is it hard to get these conversations, or are people happy to have these conversations with you?
It really depends on the individual, and it also depends on the industries that they operate in. Some are more open, some are a little bit less. I think when it comes to the more seasoned executives, really at C-level or leadership level, they're much more open to a discussion. They are much more open to hear about opportunities, and they're much more open to help you as well, because one of the best ways to open up a dialogue or open up a relationship with a search consultant is to provide them ideas for searches that they're looking for, even if it's not relevant for you. It's basically that's you're adding value, and that's how you properly engage with them. Basically, you become useful to them, so that when they really need you, really need someone like yourself, they will go back to you, and you will be one of the first ones that they will want to talk to.
Sure. Okay, so that's a good tip, right? For any C-level executive who gets a phone call, it's to their benefit to also take the phone call and get to know you and see if they can help in any way with introductions to people in their network, I'm assuming.
Yeah, exactly. It's a reciprocal thing. If you help us, then obviously we're going to be helping you as well. So it's a little bit of give and take.
Got it. So let's move on to our next question here, which is sort of following along on your process of identifying on a global level the best executives for the role. How do you identify these people? How do they get on your radar?
Well, we have our own internal database that is continuously being added to. That's the first sort of port of call. That's where we normally go to. Who do we know already? And we basically establish sources as well. Sources meaning who can we talk to, who can be helpful in putting us in touch with someone who can be a good candidate for that. That's what we call sourcing calls. So it's just talking to individuals who are operating in the same industry or in the same sector, and they will be aware of individuals who might be helpful for us to get in touch with. So that's the first port of call. And if we exhausted those avenues, then obviously we use tools like LinkedIn, obviously, but also have a look at conference agendas. Who is presenting? What are the best sort of events in that particular sector? Who's speaking? Who's the thought leader? Who publishes articles? Who gets really airtime with television networks? Things like that. I mean, you have to have a look at the trade publications, things like that. If you're mentioned, if you're talked about, then it's more likely that someone is going to be after you. Yeah,
that's great. So it sounds like it heavily depends on first your network, who you already know, who's in the database, and then to your point, they need to be sort of visible, right? They need to have a brand, a platform, speaking at events, writing articles, found on LinkedIn.
Yeah. These are probably the best ways to really get discovered. It's just because you have a good profile or just because you're searchable on the internet, it doesn't really mean anything. You really need to engage. You need to meet. You need to be in groups. For example, professional groups on LinkedIn. That would be probably the best way to engage. Meaningful comments, really putting out original thought leadership and content. I think that's probably the best way to do it.
Right. Got it. That makes sense. Yeah. So, so once you find these people, you scour the globe. You either find them through your network, find them online through trade publications, see their activities, speaking at conferences, things like that. So that's a lot of you searching for them. Going to our third point here, how would you advise people who want to establish a meaningful relationship with someone like you? Is it as easy as sending in a resume, picking up the phone? How do you like for new people to contact you?
You need to engage with the right people. And by the right people, I mean, find the search firms that serve your target industries.
Sure.
And basically find a consultant within those search firms that are most likely to be able to help you, basically. And write a personalized email with your resume attached. And you can, of course, request an in-person meeting, or maybe you can request an in-person or a phone call just to introduce yourself. And as long as they have the time and they have the availability, they will probably do that, basically. And depending on your profile, depending on your background, don't get put off if you don't hear back. A lot of people don't hear back. That's not because they have been rude. It's because they have a lot of different priorities that they have to really just act on.
Right.
And the search consultants, by the way, do share candidates with their colleagues. So if the particular person that you've approached doesn't have anything, be sure that that individual will be in touch with the relevant colleague who might have something for you, basically. So be proactive, do what I just said, and again, maintain these open and candid dialogues, and be sure that you help the search consultant and provide ideas for searches that the recruiter is working on. I think that's probably the most powerful way of really be liked and be someone who will be connected and contacted.
Got it. Great. So it seems like it's all about finding the search consultants that are relevant to your industry and relevant to your role, reaching out to them with your information, giving them, asking for a copy, a meeting, or just a conversation. You mentioned an important word there, being proactive. I know with a lot of clients that I work with, they really only think of contacting a recruiter when they need a job or after they've left a role. So they're, to your point, they're kind of out on the job market and not currently employed, which to your point is a more attractive candidate to recruiters. What's your thought, or how do you advise people on being more proactive in their career planning? So not only just thinking about executive search when they need a job, but just in their day-to-day as an executive, planning for their next step. How do you do a little coaching or advising for people like that?
Yes, I think that's a really good question, Mo, by the way, because indeed recruiters, search consultants, career coaches are used as a last resort, as an emergency room when basically all else has failed, and basically you're having to act. I think it's very important that you have an ongoing dialogue with these people. You really get smart. By that I mean, if you're considering an industry shift, you will need to get educated quite quickly on your new sector. Talk to people, put in feelers out there, set up information interviews. That's how I did it basically when I went into search. No one got in touch with me. I had to proactively go out and identify individuals who are already doing the job that I was aspiring to do. And basically just make sure that people don't see you as desperate. I mean, make sure that they understand that you're not after leads or you're not after for a job. But really make sure that they understand that you just want to understand how, by talking to them, you will be better informed or in a better position going after a job like that, basically.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, you pretty much done what you advise others to do, right? You went and did your research, you met with people, you had informational interviews. And is that how you went from the contingency search to the executive retained?
Exactly. I used really during an 8 or 9 month period, all I did was really learning, staying up to date. That's the getting smart thing that I'm talking about.
Right.
And really building up relationships in the industry. I think that's probably the best way. I didn't even know that there's such thing as search to search, which is essentially a group of people who are specializing putting one search consultant into another search consultant. They don't do anything else other than putting executive recruiters into other executive recruiters.
Oh, that's interesting. I never thought of that, but I guess that works too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Everyone can benefit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Well, listen, before we wrap up here, any final thoughts on how executives can, again, stand out, capture the attention of a recruiter or connect with a recruiter?
I think it's, again, patience is going to be really important at the moment. If you're working with a recruiter on a specific opportunity, remember the executive recruiter cannot control the interview cycle. And it's often the case that basically you're at the mercy of the client's schedule. So it's really good to follow up, really good to chase, but but get the balance right. And even things like don't overlook the thank you note. I think it's basically saying thanks, sending a message, sending a brief, well-written note, reinforcing that shows that you are really professional and you are not desperate. I think a lot of people, especially today, they're really desperate to get somewhere.
Sure.
And you can't be viewed as such because you're not going to be hired. So,
right. Yeah, that works against you.
Yeah, that works against you. And just keep your network strong and basically have a target of, 5 new connections every week or 5 new connections every day if you're very, very keen.
Right.
And meet that, exceed that, and continuously build on those conversations. So really, I'm talking about meaningful connections.
Yeah.
Not something that you speak to once in your lifetime, but someone who you can help.
Yeah.
And someone who can. And I think it's best to start with all these networking things that we hear about. I think the best way to approach it, Mo, is how can I be of service to you? And then see what the response is going to be, basically. So it has to be, it can't be one-sided.
Right. You don't want to just be taking from them. You want to also be useful to them.
Exactly.
Excellent. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time today. Just to recap, so we've covered the difference between contingency search and retained search, how executives can stand out in the job market and get the attention of a recruiter, and also how best to establish that meaningful relationship by making yourself useful to executive recruiters. So thank you for sharing all your, so thank you so much for sharing your expertise with our audience today. Really appreciate it. If anyone wants to find you, is there a place people can learn more about you?
Yeah, we'll include that in the show notes, my LinkedIn profile, maybe a link to my organization as well. That would be probably the easiest.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. All right, Arpad, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you again for the opportunity, Mo.
Absolutely, take care.